Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Bretschneider. I am a seasonal forecaster and senior climate scientist with the National Weather Service Alaska region. And this is a special broadcast, the first time we're doing it. It's going to be a recap of the last month's conditions for July 2025. Hopefully we do this on a regular basis, approximately a week after the end of the month. We got to wait for all the data to come in, and then we can kind of let you know what we observed and how that varies from normal, and so on. So I've got a bunch of slides here, so let's go ahead and get on through it. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to drop a comment below, and we will do our best to address those. Okay, I'm going to step out of the screen here because I got a lot of text. But a couple of the highlights for the month. And early in the month, there were some 90-degree temperatures from, say, Bettles into the northwestern interior and even the western North Slope regions. Bettles hit 90, 93 near, like, say, NOAA, and again, some really highly unusual, in some cases unprecedented heat for stations that have, say, maybe only 20 or 30 years of record keeping. It was their warmest on record. Now, a couple days after that, we had some snow in some of those same areas, from the Brooks Range and into parts of the North Slope. So like the Toolik Lake Field Station, just north of Adigan Pass, had a couple inches of snow. Anaktuvik Pass had a couple inches of snow. So really an unusual snow event as well. And I'll show some maps on this, but we actually had higher than average sea ice extent concentration in the Beaufort and the Chukchi Seas. And from a fire point of view, it was actually quite an extensive amount of acreage that burned this month. 633,000 acres just in July, and that brings our season total to about 1 million acres. So that's a pretty decent fire season, all things considered. Not an exceptional fire season, but probably in the upper third or so of fire seasons. Now, thankfully, things are winding down, so probably won't add too many more acres to that total, but still, we're going to end up with over 1 million, so that's pretty interesting. I'm going to step out of the screen again. I'm not going to go through all these, but I just wanted to show that kind of a brief list of the records, daily records that were set, and you'll see a lot of, let's see if I can reach across here. A lot of these say high. So high preset, high max, high max, high max, high max min. We did have a record low, a low max, high, 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 and then this is for the first 3 weeks of the month, and then for the last 10 days of the month, again, warm, 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 warm. A lot of warm records, only that one cool record, and it was really, it was a month with a lot of high temperature records early in the month, and a lot of. We see all these mins, high min, high min, high min. That means it's the warmest overnight low temperature. Okay, so we're talking an extensive period of time where we had warm low temperatures. Okay, and so our sea ice. So I have two images here. These are from the first and the last day of the month. And the key thing to keep an eye on is the Chukchi and the Beaufort Sea. Look how they're both greater than 100%. So basically, more ice than average. Now this is for our recent average, not our long-term historical average. So this is on the first of the month. And then on the 31st of the month, of course, I'm going to just go back and forth here real quick. It's less ice, as you would expect at the end of July, but we're still higher than what we typically have for this time of the year. Okay, and so this, how do we do this? This panel right here shows what the average should be. And then now we see what we actually have this year. And we also can see a couple of the most recent years. If I can step off here, here, here. Having a hard time figuring out the pointing thing here. So thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so let's look at temperatures, how we did over the course of the month. Now this is a statewide average temperature. So don't think just Fairbanks or just Kodiak or just Bethel. This is statewide. And remember we had those 90-degree temperatures the first few days of the month? Okay, so for the entire state, upwards of 8 degrees above normal for the entire state. That's for July, that's quite a dramatic warm spell. And then remember that snow north of the Brooks Range or in the Brooks Range? A couple days here where it was pretty chilly for the month of July. And then as you can see, we kind of bounce up and down, up and down. And then the last 5 or 6 days of the month, we ended up in that red, with those red bars, the above normal. Overall, about 1.5 degrees warmer than normal. Again, this is statewide time series, so I'm going to go into some maps and some specific locations as well. Okay, so this is a map based on station data, and we're going to have another map here soon using another data source, but just stations, and you can see the little dots here for stations, and it tries to interpolate in between. But it shows about 1 degree warmer than normal using, again, that station data. But as we know, Alaska is a big place with a lot of very large gaps in our data. So whenever you see maps based on just station data, you know, it's great for where we have the data, but all the areas in between, you know, not so great in a lot of cases. But that notwithstanding, you can see that most of the state is in some shade of yellow or orange or even some darker reds, except for the Kuskokwim River Basin, you know, from you know, north of Nikolai all the way down to the coast. Even southeast was warmer than normal, and all the central, northern, and eastern interior, south central here around Anchorage, pretty close to normal for the entire month. Okay, so let's look at how Anchorage did for the month of July, and Anchorage was 0.9 degrees warmer than normal. So normal is 59.7, and that's this black line here. And this year we were 59.8. And that's all the highs and the lows averaged together. So you add them all up, divide by 31, and that's what you get. Now, it's a little bit warmer than it was the last 1, 2, 3, 4 Julys, but the 8 or so years before that was a really extended run of very warm Julys. Of course, 2019, the all-time record. As you can see, there's a long-term trend that Julys are getting warmer. How about Juneau? Juneau is notably getting a lot warmer as well. The normal for the month, this is the 1991 to 2020 normals, 57.2, and they're about 1.2 degrees warmer than normal. Last July was a little bit cool, but you know, 10 or so of the last 12 years, Julys have been above normal, but not record normal. Maybe top 10, top 12 warmest for July this year. And then finally for Fairbanks, again, there's a notable long-term trend in normal. What is our normal now for 1991 to 2020? We didn't hit for decades. So what's normal now would have been an all-time record for a number of decades. But it was fairly warm. It was about 1.5 degrees above normal. Not as warm as it was in 2023 or 2021 or 2019, but still a fairly warm month in Fairbanks land. Okay, so now let's look at precipitation. Again, this is station data, and especially with precipitation, because it can be so spotty, you can have large events that are completely missed when you just are using stations. So caveat, that's an important caveat here. But South Central Alaska, so south of the Alaska Range, pretty dry, pretty much everywhere. Southeast Alaska, some near normal, some slightly below normal. Overall, not too many extremes. Northwest Alaska, again, only a couple of stations here. So we have to take this with a grain of salt, but kind of drier than normal. But really not a lot of green on this map. Not a lot of places that were notably wetter than normal in the month of July. So a couple of the big stations. Anchorage was about 1/2 inch drier than normal. And look how this compares against the last 3 Julys. So 1.34 this July, but over 4 inches each of the prior 3 Julys. So a big change compared to the last couple of years. Juneau. Juneau also drier than normal in July. So about 1.5 inches drier than normal, which is still kind of gearing or getting in toward the wet season, which is the fall in Juneau, but 5 inches is a decent amount for the normal. Not anywhere near what we had last year with over 12 inches, the all-time record wet Juno. So only almost maybe 30% as much rain fell this July as compared to last July in Juneau. So I'm sure the folks down there are pretty happy about that, considering how wet it was in the spring. And then finally, Fairbanks. Fairbanks was almost exactly normal, only 1/100th of a difference from normal. You can see that's right on the line here. Last July was quite wet, over 4 inches of rain. And there's a lot more variability in Fairbanks. Here in 2009, practically nothing. A couple of years in 2022 and 2023, less than an inch. But overall, again, this is exactly normal, exactly what you would expect in Fairbanks precipitation-wise for the month of July. Okay, so that's what we got for station data. But what I also want to introduce is something that we call reanalysis data. And this is a way of assimilating all kinds of data, from satellite data to weather balloon data, to station data, to just all kinds of stuff, and model data. If we say it's 50 degrees in this location and 50 in this location, or 55 in this location, we wouldn't just split the difference and say, well, it's halfway in between. Maybe there's mountains there, and maybe there's other things going on. So we can use the computer model to help us interpolate what's going on between those areas. And so July reanalysis data helps us to better characterize what the conditions were like across the state. So I'm going to go through some maps here. And this is a map showing the temperature departure for July 2025. And in this case, it came up with 1.2 degrees warmer than normal. So just like with the station data, it showed the one below normal area here in the middle and lower Kuskokwim Delta. Warmer than normal in Northwest Alaska, most of the interior, and through Southeast a little bit, not much in terms of the wave departures. And generally a little bit warmer than normal, but not very much here in the Anchorage area, but in general, South Central was warmer than normal. Quite a bit different than what we had in Northwest Canada. So we had big upper level high pressure up here, and big upper level low pressure over here. And the result was a northerly flow over here, but this was a warm high pressure over here. So they got the cool, we got the warm, particularly in the high latitudes, north of the Arctic Circle. Long-term time series for temperatures in Alaska. This is a statewide average, so we're not picking spots. This is the statewide average. And I think it was ended up being about the 15th or 20th warmest. For the last, since about the year 2000, it's probably a little warmer than the 2000 to 2024 average. But not nearly as warm as many of the years since 1990. So I guess we'll take it. This is a running 12-month average statewide. And you can see, back in the 2013 through 2019 period, we were really warm, and we've kind of reset a little bit, but we're on that upward trajectory again. So if you remember those really warm years from 5 to 10 years ago, just one after another, it really shot that running total up, that running average. And we had a little bit of a reset on that, but we're back trending upward again. And speaking of trends, this is a 75-year trend of temperatures across Alaska for the month of July, and it includes this year. And you can see, it's a dramatic warming trend everywhere. This darkest red here is, can't figure this out, 4.5 degrees. And so we see much of Southeast Alaska, Prince William Sound, greater Prince William Sound area, and the West Coast, Northwest Coast, A lot of this is going to be a result of warmer water temperatures as a result of earlier sea ice melt in, say, late May and June. But anyway, the trend obviously is much warmer. All right, so now let's look at precipitation. And this is where reanalysis really shines, is because it can really help fill in those gaps that we just completely guessing when we have station data. And overall, we're coming up with about 93% of normal for the entire state. Now we have to be careful with those because Southeast Alaska, even in its dry season, gets a lot more precipitation than almost anywhere else in the state. So sometimes this can be really driven by what happens in Southeast. So keep that in mind. But there's a whole lot more yellows and oranges on this map than there are greens. So South Central area, some of the darker shades of orange compared to anywhere else. And again, north of the Arctic Circle, every place is really somewhere below normal, somewhere between 50 and 95% of normal. Really the only places that were notably wet, okay, were down Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, the west coast south of the Seward Peninsula, and then parts of Southwest. So in general, the southwestern part of the state, most areas were wetter than normal in July, and pretty much everywhere else was drier than normal. And that contributed to the 680,000 acres of a fire that we saw this month. Long-term time series, not a lot of trend, well, a little bit of an upward trend here. But notice how, okay, how are we going to do this? Okay, so notice how in 2025, much less precipitation. Well, last July was our wettest July on record statewide, so about 5 inches average. This time about 3.2 inch, so a lot less, and the least amount in 5 years. So again, statewide average was under 100% normal, so it's not too surprising to see this dot down here, but certainly compared to the last few Julys, it really is a big difference. But one of the really amazing statistics, if you look statewide, is this running total, this 12-month running total of precipitation. And for the last about 3 years, I mean, look how we just are staying really high up here. Historically high precipitation totals statewide. So there's really been a lot of precipitation, and that's rain and melted snow. So it's not just wet or dry, warm season precipitation. But the last few years have really been wetter collectively statewide than any period, in the last, say, 85 years or longer. And this is our trend, our 75-year trend, and we see this almost 12% increase in precipitation for the month of July. And most every place is some shade of green or even some spots of blue here. So 20-25% increase in July precipitation is not uncommon in many areas. And then only some places in the central part of the state away from the coast do see some declines, but those are really overwhelmed by the green areas. And look at Southeast. It's been a big trend, a big change in the trend of precipitation in the southeastern part of the state. Okay, so that's temperature and precipitation. Let's go to some other less frequently displayed variables. I did want to show snow. I mean, yeah, it's July, but guess what? Sometimes in some places in the mountains it snows in July. And even in July, snow in the mountains does make a difference. It can provide some albedo coverage. It's really important for wildlife. So having snow in July is not just a novelty. It can have some real tangible benefits. This is our statewide average of July snow for the last 85 years. And yeah, it's not a lot. Statewide average of a half an inch. Now, you might say, well, where's my half an inch of snow? Obviously, when we're talking, the Alaska Range, the Wrangels, some of the coastal ranges in Southeast, they might get 20, 30, 50 inches of snow in July, and you have to, the average kind of spreads that out everywhere. But in general, a little bit of a decreasing trend in July snowfall over the years. How about clouds, right? Clouds, June, July. This is our high sun season time of the year. We're really, we're out doing stuff all times of the day. I know I am, and it really makes a big difference if you have cloud cover or not. And what we see is really from about Fairbanks northward, from about 64, 65 degrees latitude northward, it was really, there was really not a lot of clouds. In fact, these yellow areas show there was, this is a departure, so 13% fewer clouds. So if normally it was, 60%, maybe it was only, say, 47 or 45% cloud cover. Down here in South Central, a little bit more cloudy than normal. That's these shades of gray. Southeast had a little bit of green, which is near normal. A little bit of yellow and orange, which would be a little bit less cloudy than normal. Overall, we were 3.6 degrees less cloudy than normal statewide in the month of July. How about wind? Did it feel windy to you? As a personal observation, I've noticed over the years that people comment that they always feel like it seems windier than it used to be. Well, now we've got some data that can put some numbers to that. And for 2025 July, look at that, 0.0 difference. So it was a completely average July in terms of wind. And really in most of the interior, it was, again, it was just kind of spot on average. Here kind of around the western and southwestern periphery, it was a little bit more windy than normal. North slope and maybe southeast, a little less windy than normal, but really not large departures from normal in any cases. Now, how about the dew point? Did it feel humid to you this month? The dew point is a physical, not exactly, but it's almost a physical representation of the amount of moisture in the air. And it was fairly moist across Alaska this July. So all these areas of green show where there was more moisture at the surface. This is surface moisture. That there was more surface moisture this month in July 2025, than average. So it's kind of interesting that even some of the places that were below normal temperatures had above normal surface moisture. Normally I wouldn't show relative humidity. Really the only time of the year I would show it is in June and July, because it's an important factor when we're looking at wildfires. And overall, this is a classification, so not a departure from normal. But overall, it was more humid than normal in the central and western interior, and lower than normal humidity in south central, even much below, and then all the way down kind of coastal southeast. Not a lot of really important patterns to this, except for, I think this over here is the biggest area of note. We just didn't see a whole lot of days where the humidity was really low, which would have led to more significant fire conditions. And then our sea surface temperatures. Most of the Gulf of Alaska had warmer water than typical. Most of the Bering Sea, at least the northern Bering Sea, had a little bit cooler than normal water. And then some of these areas right along the coast, these are kind of tricky. Has to do in cases with upwelling, has to do with local currents, when the ice broke up in some of these cases in the month of June. So these are really tricky signals up here. But in any event, for the southern half of the state, the adjacent waters were generally warmer than normal. And then our sea ice conditions, like I showed you earlier, sea ice in the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas actually did pretty well in the month of July. All the other basins around the world had really significantly lower than average sea ice. So we kind of won the sea ice lottery locally. Don't expect that to happen every year, but it did this year. And the sea ice minimum, we're still another month away from that. So when we do this again next month, expect those shades of blue to be farther to the north. All right, well, thank you for bearing with me for this extended broadcast. Hopefully we're able to do this on a monthly basis and just provide monthly and even seasonal. So in a month, we will have finished the June, July, August period, so we could have a seasonal recap as well, instead of just a monthly recap. So again, if you have some ideas, suggestions, or questions, comments, criticisms, whatever, just drop it in the comments below and we will do our best to address them. Thank you very much. Have a great day.